As chair of the Deacon Board, I get the pleasure of welcoming you to Envision Weekend. Envision Weekend is a unique weekend for our church. It's a time where we get to share some information and share some vision with you, and so that's very exciting. I know for me in my life, I can get busy at times just doing stuff without really thinking about why I'm doing it or what I'm really trying to accomplish. And so today, we get to pause kind of as a church and think about those things for ourselves as a community. What are we doing and what are we trying to accomplish? So we want to really be thinking about our vision of being a church for the city that reaches the world for Christ. And so we get to reset, take stock of the past year, and then look forward and look ahead. And we're going to be doing that in the framework of 4 strategic priorities that you've heard about over the past year or so. The first one being gospel-centered, then being neighbor-loving, disciple-making, and culture-shaping. So really today, we get to celebrate what God has been doing in each one of those areas, and we're going to identify some areas that God may have for us that we can take hold of in the coming year. And JP is going to get us started.
Well, good morning. If you do not have one of these booklets, if you could just raise your hand. Wow, you guys did a great job. All right, we've got a couple staff members who are going to be handing those out. But I want to bring you to pages 5 and 6, and we're going to go over some numbers that kind of tell the story and celebrate the faithfulness of God in our church as a whole. And when I think of celebrating, I look back at Easter. And I look at page 6 where we cooked up 600 pounds of bacon, 100 pounds of pancake batter, and cracked 2,340 eggs, and we all consumed it. It was amazing. It was a celebratory morning, and not only did we eat it, but there were so many volunteers who served that morning, who gave up part of their Easter morning to serve our church, and I just am blown away by some of those numbers. I also think about the entertainment of our midweek Hot Ones challenge with our staff, where the staff endured 30,440,000 Scoville units of heat by eating chicken wings for our pain and your benefit. I think of the oil changes that happened over at First Lube, the 2,943 cars that were serviced. But I also think about some of the more impactful numbers, like your generosity. I've grown up at this church, and the generosity of this church always astounds me. The financial ways that you give, whether it's through missions or the baby bottle boomerang, the impact giving, the Deacons Fund, the Christmas offering, and so many other areas are a celebration and a testimony of the faithfulness that God has done in and through our church and in and through you. I think about the volunteer hours. If you look at that bottom of page 6, the time spent volunteering. As a whole, our body, has volunteered over just this past year over 100,000 hours. Whether that's through keeping up and making our property look beautiful, helping in the nursery, Infusion, Thrive, helping at Skills Camp, or being on the security team, and so many other areas, the volunteers, you as this church, make this church go. And while numbers aren't everything, so many of these numbers help remind us and tell the story of the life-changing events that have happened over this past year, which reminds me of our mission statement, which is to bring people into a life-changing relationship with God and each other. And the number I want to highlight as we move into our first strategic priority of being gospel-centered is the number of new believers from this past year. While the national average for a church is about a 1% conversion rate, we saw around 155 new believers happen. That is a 15% conversion rate. And then you add in the ministry of our school, where we saw 14 students give their life also to add on to that 155. And I'm sure there are more that happen in your coworkers, in your friends, in your neighborhoods, and in your lives. But through the ministries of our church, we saw lives change for the gospel. And that's what it means to be gospel-centered. I think about, if you turn to the next page, on page 7, that first line where it says, the good news of Jesus Christ is the driving force for everything we do and the very reason we exist. The gospel is the reason you give sacrificially your finances. The gospel is the reason you give up those weekends to hang out with middle schoolers, or you take work off so you can go to skills camp. You show up at 7 o'clock in the morning to make this campus safe because the gospel is the thing that drives you. The gospel is the reason that First Loop stays open and that people get second chances at life. The gospel is the reason that we have a purpose for today and a vision for the future. And our vision is to be a church for the city that reaches the world for Christ. And we saw the gospel take hold of that vision this year through 2 short-term mission trips. The first being our high school one to the DR, to the Dominican Republic, where they built 2 chapels. They did sports ministry, VBS, evangelism, and the gospel was proclaimed to hundreds of different people in the Dominican. And those churches are meeting today now. Those chapels are meeting today where the gospel is being preached still. And then our Spain mission trip, where we went over and we partnered with missionaries from all across the world, and where they were equipped, they were trained, they were given a place of rest, where our team was able to partner with them to love their kids so that the parents could be trained and equipped for the mission work that was back in their country so the gospel could reach the world. Being gospel-centered has moved our church from within, where lives are being changed, but it has also moved us outwardly to reach the world. And now Stephanie is going to share how this impacts the way we love our neighbors.
Thanks. As JP said, I get to share with you for just a few minutes about what it looks like to be a church that is neighbor-loving. In Luke 6:32 through 36, it talks about not only loving those who are like us, but also loving our enemies. And the text says in verse 32 that it's easy to love and serve those who believe like us, but it's not enough because even the pagans can do that. So we want to be set apart. What makes Salem First Baptist a church for the city who reaches the world for Christ is that we're moving towards those who are different than us. We're loving our neighbors without an agenda or expectation in return. And Luke 6:35 calls us to do just that. People donate their time or money to causes they're passionate about all the time. We're seeing it a lot this month. There's huge groups of people coming together for a cause, something that they're passionate about, and they're coming together with people who align with them. But that's the point. They're doing it with people who align with them. We don't see these groups that oppose the church asking to serve us, asking how they can love us better, or donating money to us. But we want to be a church that loves our city. And it can be difficult to serve those who are starkly different than us, or even opposed to us. And it can be uncomfortable to step into that world because it creates a tension that a lot of us would rather avoid. We step out of our comfort zone and the safety of our church walls in order to serve our neighbor. And when we do, we have to wrestle with what it looks like to be in the world, but not of it. We have to wrestle with whether to speak up with the truth of the gospel or just live it out with our actions. We risk looking like we stand for something that maybe we don't, and it exposes the potential to offend others with our beliefs. But we also get a front row seat to the brokenness of the world. And sometimes our efforts appear fruitless, and we wonder if our time and efforts might be better spent elsewhere, like back in the church. And don't get me wrong, we need people in the church. As JP said, we had 100,000 hours given to volunteer service this year, and we need that. But Christ called us to love our neighbor, and he called us to love our enemy. And that requires that we step out of the safety of the church walls and outside of the safety of our home. So that's something we purpose to do here at SFB. And when we do, we gain influence and permission to share Christ with our neighborhood, sometimes through the actions of living out the gospel, and sometimes through the words of the gospel. And one of our values here at SFB is to give generously out of the resources that God has blessed us with. And this year we were able to do that with some of our schools. We provided several gifts and meals to teachers across the city. But it wasn't just a meal or a token of encouragement. It gave us favor in the sight of over 350 public school employees, many of whom might not know Christ yet. 350 people will drive by Salem First Baptist or hear us mentioned in conversation at some point, and maybe they'll remember that sassy onion breakfast burrito bar that they enjoyed, or the popcorn bar or the charcuterie board that we gifted to them. And they'll have a positive thought of our church and a softer heart towards God. And our hope is that in someday, our small gesture of loving our neighbor might provide us with the opportunity to share the love of Jesus Christ with them. And one of the things I've done as we begin to partner with 4R schools this year is to try to find a person in that school that can be my access point. And at Roberts, and for those of you who don't know who Roberts is, a school where kids who maybe aren't having success in the traditional public school classroom go. So there's lots of opportunity and brokenness and need there. At Roberts, the person I connected with this year was the community school outreach coordinator. And I was sitting with her one day this past winter, and she was sharing some of the difficulties of getting parents involved with a resource event that they had coming up. She was excited about all the resources the city had, and she wanted to get them into the hands of the students and their families. And I kind of knew how she felt, because as a parent, I understand what it looks like to be super busy. And as a leader, I understand the difficulty and frustration of sometimes of meeting the needs of families and the people we care about. She explained how disappointed they were by the previous year's engagement at their event, where only 7 families showed up. So as I sat there, I realized that we had this shared experience, and I offered an idea that has worked for me. Use kids as leverage. We're actually doing it tonight. We've got an event called Parent Download coming up tonight, and parents, we've told you that we're gonna have snacks and crumble cookies and giveaways for you, but we've also told your kids that if their parents show up, they'll get entered in drawings as well. So we used this, and we bought Roberts AirPods and Xbox gift cards, Nike gift cards, and everything that kids would love, and they raffled them off at their event, and families showed up. They went from about 7 families to 35 families at this event this year. And this is just one example of how our just intentional partnership in loving our city is changing our neighborhood. Another expression of our commitment to being a neighbor-loving church is our Serve Salem ministry. And this coming August, hundreds of us are going to spread out across the city to donate our time by volunteering in various schools and businesses. Many of these places we serve have policies and a value system that don't necessarily align with our own, but loving them through action might just give us the opportunity to bring them into a life-changing relationship with Jesus Christ. Another one of our values is prayer. So watch this video to see how our young adults are walking across our street to our neighbor, Willamette University, and saturating them in prayer.
Welcome to Willamette. Almost 190 years ago, in 1834, a Methodist missionary named Jason Lee arrives in the Oregon Territory. His mission on behalf of the Methodist Church was to reach the local Native American population. He arrives to a tribe of people that were plagued by disease, and so he starts the Oregon Institute, which became Willamette University in 1842. His mission was to reach the local Native Americans, but also to develop an educational center for local settlers. But as is often the case, Willamette lost touch with their roots. What was a springboard for multiple missionaries all across the Pacific Northwest has become a campus very close to the gospel. But our church has not lost hope for this university. For the past 40 years, we have supported campus missionaries via campus ambassadors to Willamette University. And this past year, we decided to increase our efforts. As your young adult pastor, it's been my job to reach the young adults of this community, and I've been trying for years with Willamette. When I first began, I tried strategizing all kinds of different ways to reach them. We tried multiple different invites. I spoke with students and with other leadership. We tried debates, we tried seminars, and nothing was working. It was actually this past winter that I felt like God was saying, just pray. The strategy will come later. I announced to our young adult group that I was going to start a prayer ministry in the fall of 2023 called Reach. The mission was in the name, to reach these students, and I didn't know what was going to happen, so I said, we're going to commit to pray. In my apparently lack of faith view, I thought we would start in the fall of 2023, but after that message, multiple students lined up to talk to me. The first was a young lady that said, I work at the Capitol, which is right across the street from Willamette. I could start a Reach group, she said, on Fridays during my lunch hour. And I said, that's great, I'll sign you up. And she said, do I need to wait for the fall of 2023 or can I start right now? This was back in January. And I said, you can start whenever you would like. The next person after her was actually a Willamette student. And this was his first week. He said, I've been praying for months that someone would have a burden for my campus, and I think I found the right church. The student after him in line was a young man that goes to Corbin University, and he runs a discipleship group with his friends. And he said, can I go back to my buddies and tell them about this ministry, and then maybe we'll start a reach group on campus? It's not even a school they go to, and they've committed to pray for this campus for months. What I thought in my head would be a ministry that would start in the fall of 23 began actually 8 months earlier than I intended, because there's multiple people in our church that just have a deep, deep love for this campus. Between the 3 reach groups, we've clocked in over 150 hours of prayer, and that's conservative. It's actually probably close to 200. There's another individual in our church. He's here getting his master's. He's a small business owner in our church, and he said, can I come with you and pray? If you have a burden for the college students of our city, if you love Willamette and want to see revival here, then please come pray with us. I don't know what God's going to do, but I know that I want to be here when He does it. So please come join us as we reach Willamette.
Gospel-centered, neighbor-loving, and now disciple-making. Why is this one of our 4 strategic priorities? There's 2 reasons. Number 1 is Jesus commands it, and the second is He models it in His life and asks us to copy Him. If you read Matthew 28, that's where we named it the Great Commission. Jesus says, I'm going to leave, and while I am gone, you will make disciples of all nations, teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And later in John 14:12, He says, if you love me, you will do what I have been doing. So if we as a church are going to be obedient to the message of Jesus, if we're going to develop a discipleship system, it should look like His life. So what do we see when we look at Jesus? Jesus intentionally invited and processed life and theology with kids. On the other side of the age spectrum, He makes special provision for seniors and widows to make sure not only that they are not taken advantage of in this life, but also that they are not alone when they die. And so when Jesus does another thing, He ministers with and to His peers and does 2 things simultaneously that are very difficult. He not only builds intentional, deep intimacy with His friends, but He also is so welcoming that those that vehemently disagree with Him find a welcome presence as they discuss life with Him. So I see Jesus ministering with those that are younger than Him. I see Him ministering with those that are older. I see Him ministering to His peers, those that are very similar and those that are very different. And so if we as a church are going to copy Him, our discipleship ministry should look like that. And that is what we have endeavored to do at this church. You will see specific ministries to people from infancy all the way through college, ensuring that the child and the parent are seen and heard, discipled, and that their needs are met. We have worked extremely hard to bridge that transition from childhood to adulthood. And with our young adults, we are making sure that they're not just coming to church because their parents do, they're coming to church because they're falling in love with the mission of God. And they are discovering their own unique identity and their own gifting. And we are seeing huge fruit in this area as over 60% of our young adults in this church are serving in another area in this church. And we didn't stop there. We have built adult community groups, we've built home groups, mom-to-mom ministry, specific ministries to men and to women, to ensure that you are discipled at every stage of your life, including at the end of it. Our Caring Hands ministry makes sure that even when your body rebels and doesn't allow you to come to in-person meetings anymore, we will come to you, and we will make sure that you are seen and that you are loved and that your needs are met and that you feel a part of this church even when you can't come. As we looked at the fruitfulness of all of these different ministries, we noticed that we're not only seeing fruit in the ministry, we're seeing this in our staff. As right now, in our current staff, over 50% of them grew up in this church. They were discipled by you, and you let them grow up and become your leaders. I was talking to Marilyn Fry. She swaddled JP. But a couple weeks ago, JP led communion, and she was in the room. And she let him lead her. You have done a phenomenal job as you have overseen the lives of Caleb, JP, Sean, Christy, Hannah, Isaiah, and myself, leading to a staff that has an age range of early 20s to mid 70s. We are not led by one generation, we are led by many generations, and you have let us do that. Whether you have never stepped foot in a church or whether you've grown up in the church, we are here for you. From the moment that you are born to the moment that you pass away, we are here for you and committed to teach you and grow with you. Our final strategic priority is culture shaping, and Pastor Jeff is going to walk you through what we are doing in that area.
Hi, I am Pastor Jeff, and I read a story years ago about an explorer that wanted to hike to the North Pole. But he wanted to leave a ledger, a chronicle for the next person that might want to follow his course. So he equipped himself with all the latest gadgets and gizmos. He took his trusty compass and he set out toward the North Pole. Every hour he would stop and set up his instruments and record his journey. And a funny thing happened. He came to a point where his instruments told him he was heading south, but his compass said, "You're heading north." So he chalked it up to an instrument error and he double timed it. Set up his instruments. Yep, you're heading south. Compass said, "You're heading north." He continued to trudge forward until he came to the edge of a large iceberg that was traveling south faster than he was traveling north. What's the moral of the story? There's a big difference between activity and progress. At First Baptist Church, we are not interested in being busy for Jesus. We are interested in making progress. And when we look at our fourth strategic priority, at being a culture-shaping church, it's really exciting because this serves as one of our targets. It's one of our North Poles. It's something we are striving after. But it's also one of the instruments, it's one of the tools we use to determine whether or not we're on course. We believe that if we are doing our job in the first three categories, it will manifest itself in the fourth. How well are we loving our neighbors? Are we sharing the gospel? Are we discipling people? Because if so, it's going to show up. And one of the areas of ministry that it's showing up is Upward Basketball, which is an area that I have been blessed to become fairly acquainted with over the past few years. When we started, one of the things that really struck me was the opportunity to change the culture of youth sports. Any of us that have been around youth sports, we know that it has lost its collective mind. Even this morning, I read an article online about a group of umpires in Boston that are protesting the playoffs because of how horribly they have been treated by not the little immature kids, but by the big immature adults. No one would probably disagree that we need to change the culture of youth sports. And I wanted to be part of that, but I was extremely myopic. I was very short-sighted because I thought the only place I could influence people was in that gymnasium. And I was wrong. And I knew it the day I got a phone call from a gentleman who was the president of an insurance company. And he said, "Hey, Jeff, I'm doing a leadership retreat. Would it be okay if I use some of the material that you gave us in coaches training? I really want to use your circle of affirmation and your circle of criticism to help train my staff." And I said, "Well, of course." I knew I was short-sighted when a former coach came to me and said, "Hey, Jeff, I'm coaching my daughter's soccer team, and I'm using your philosophy of coaching in 360 degrees, that we want to help our kids grow athletically, mentally, socially, and spiritually. So thanks for giving us that tool." I knew I was myopic when a coach called and said, "Hey, Jeff, I'm using your substitution system for my son's t-ball team." And then before this season started, I got a call from a former coach who said, "Hey, Jeff, I coached for you for a couple of years, and our family moved to Madras. I enrolled my daughter in our local basketball program, and it was an absolute dumpster fire. And I accidentally opened my mouth, and I kind of started giving them some of the suggestions that I learned in Upward, and they just called and asked me to direct the league next year. Will you help me?" I said, "Yeah, I'm going to get in the car and go to Madras." What did I learn? Those principles didn't stay in that gymnasium. They move from that gymnasium out into our community and beyond, and that's our goal no matter what ministry we're running. Whether it's a fusion or thrive, or whether it's a community group or a home group. We don't want to be introverted. We want to take the principles and the values that we have learned. We want to help motivate and equip and inspire our people to take those values and move them into our community so that our community will begin to reflect the very heart of God. And how do we know we're on course? Well, periodically we stop and we set up our instruments and we recalibrate ourselves to make sure that we haven't inadvertently wandered on to an iceberg. We're keeping our eyes fixed on true north. We are plowing ahead, hoping and praying and desiring that our congregation would love their neighbors intentionally, they would share the gospel courageously, that we would disciple those that will follow us so that we can transform and reshape the culture around us. And we're going to keep pressing on to reach that goal. And Pastor Mark is going to come share with us some of the neat things that are happening in the future.
So I am neither 20 nor in my mid-70s. Now you can figure out the rest of who the staff is, but I will forever have JP being swaddled by Marilyn in my mind. That's cute. And your parents did a really good job. I love statistics. I do. But sometimes you just have to let them sink in and say, God, it is what it is, and that's because of you. I hang around a lot of churches and a lot of pastors, and they don't always get a day like this where they get to celebrate nearly 200 people that have prayed to receive Christ through one church. And so sometimes I don't like to feel like I'm forcing people, but I think in this moment before we move forward, we just need to pause and kind of say to the Father, God, this is all because of you. Because apart from him, we can do nothing. So how about if we just say to the Lord, thank you. As we move forward, I want to talk about 3 areas in the strategy. This may be new to you. If you're brand new to the church, you're like, man, you guys talk more like you're running an IBM business strategy meeting. Well, we're not. I think the church should be the most strategically driven and led organization in the world. Why? Because Christ was. He had a mission, he had a vision. Paul had a mission and a vision. Remember Paul's strategy? I'm going to go where the gospel's never been preached. I'm going to go to commercial cities so that the gospel can advance everywhere. I'm going to go to the synagogue till I get kicked out. Then I'm going to go to places of prayer, lead people to Christ, form a church, appoint elders, and split and go do it again. And I'm going to do this as many times as I can so that the gospel spreads larger outside of its point of origin. Do you realize that Christianity is the only one that has ever done that in the world? Christianity is the only faith that is larger outside of its point of origin. And so the church, don't ever buy the idea that the church should not think strategically. The church must. Why? Because otherwise you fall back into the tyranny of the urgent. You fall back into trends. You fall back into what's popular. And sometimes what's popular is not good. And so we as a church want to look. And so we, in Philippians chapter 3, page 14 is where I'm at, have really embraced that not that we have already obtained all of this maturity, we have not arrived. We'll never say that. Or we've already arrived at my goal. No, I press on to take hold of that for which Christ has taken hold of for us. What are some of the things that God is taking hold of for us next year? I want to just talk about 3 things. Number 1 is the Center for Health and Healing. For years, our church has been offering divorce care. Why? Because people get divorced. It doesn't mean we endorse it. It doesn't mean we applaud it. It just means it happens. And we're not going to tell people who have been divorced, wow, you can't come to our church. That'd be like telling people who have cancer, you can't come to Grief Share. The reality is those things happen. And we've had over the years grief share, people who are processing loss, and divorce care, people who are processing divorce and moving on. We've had that, but we've come to the conclusion that that's insufficient. It's not enough. Why? Well, because online from 12 a.m. to 4 a.m., the three most significant sites that are visited virtually every night are porn, suicide, and depression. Anxiety. What does that produce? It produces a culture. It produces a culture that is completely twisted on gender. We can't, in the cultural setting, we can't say there's a man or a woman. People are getting fired for that kind of stuff. And so what we're doing in this area for Center of Health and Healing is we're inviting people to come. We've created a class, for example, on a biblical worldview of gender and sexuality. We're not only training in that class, but we're processing, helping, and supporting families who might have somebody in their family that is struggling with that area or maybe even walking down that path. And rather than saying, good luck, hope it works out, we're saying, let's come together. We are this fall going to be offering a class through the center on anxiety and grief. We're going to be talking about developing healthy financial models for families. Why? Because the average family, range 25 to 45, is going to spend 107% this year of their gross income. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out when you spend 107% on average of your gross income, you get in trouble financially, correct? That's the average. There's scores of families that simply don't know how to live with contentment. They don't know how to restrain themselves. They don't know how to cut up certain cards. They don't know how to ratchet themselves back. And so because of that, they get themselves in trouble. And rather than saying, go figure it out on your own, we say as a church, let's help. We're going to be looking at trauma this fall. We're going to be looking at nutrition. We're going to be looking at marriage coaching. We would like to say to our city, not only do we want to coach marriages in here, but there's going to be a score of families that can't afford $125 or $150 an hour. They can't go to a counselor. And so rather than, again, sending them down the road, we want to train up people, and we'll be partnering with other organizations under the center to help develop mentors and develop people who know how to come alongside these marriages. People tell me, and I'm fairly engaged in this area, that within a few number of years, 3, maybe 5, that as a Christian, you won't be able to be licensed in this state and legally, if you will, counsel. If you have a biblical worldview of gender and sexuality and the LGBTQ whole concept. It's illegal in California to counsel a person to transition out of a certain lifestyle. And they're going to do that in Oregon. It's already coming down the pike where as a licensed individual, your license is either going to be revoked or suspended if they catch and discover that you're helping a person counsel them out of, for example, transgendering. It's foreseeable within the near future, 3-5 years, no more than 7, that there really won't be, and I'll probably take a stab on this one, or people will disagree, but there won't be legitimate Christian counselors who are licensed in this state. Meaning, if they're a Christian, they will have set the scripture aside. And so we need, rather than dusting our hands and saying, hey, forget it, we're just going to step out of that field. We got to step into that field and possibly become part of what training up, maybe in the area of not licensed counselors, but pastoral. That doesn't mean they're pastors in the sense that they don't know what they're doing. It means that they don't land themselves in the licensure track, because that's where they will get shut down, and that's where actually they will get revoked in terms of their license. That's what the center wants to head towards and develop. Not only that, we have been investing in this tool, number 2, called Seacrest. Since 1967, we've owned this retreat center. It's been a gift to us, huge gift, and also a tool. Probably in the vicinity of 3,000 to 4,000 people every year come to Seacrest. They're discipled. They find Christ. The communities are built. And over the years, candidly, for a lot of those years, we really didn't invest in Seacrest. We used it, we presumed upon it, we just kind of ran it into the ground. We came to the point where a number of years ago we tried to sell it. Praise God, that didn't work. And now we're investing in it. You are. We have redone some of the electrical work, the plumbing, the kitchen, the great room, the windows, and now in our last project, you helped us take the whole bedroom side of the lodge to a whole new level. Uncle Larry's gonna take us on a little trip. Let's go with him.
Here it is. We are cleaned up and we're ready for the first renters, and it's all painted and clean. So let's go see it. As I think through the project, it's nice to get to the end and I get on to thinking about the next thing. But this project, it's neat in that ministry is going to happen here from now on. And that's what the exciting part about Seacrest is. It's a place to rest, it's a place to meet God, it's a place to grow. We just walked into the lodge, and you can remember back in February when all the contractor tools were here. We had boards everywhere. Now it's clean again. For those that have many memories, you know this room. The new furniture should be arriving shortly. You know, I've said it every time, the ocean view. God makes it perfect every day. And we've had the opportunity for the last 5 months to watch. Even in the storms, that ocean is beautiful. Thank you, the Lord. We used to have glass doors, an outside porch. Now we have 2 new bathrooms, and we got the other one with the bathtub. And of course, then we have the door that goes out on the deck. Just like at home, we have many projects that can continue. The deck needs probably a new deck pretty soon. And we have a lot of landscaping we can do. We do have the Boy Scout group coming over in July to help work on the path. That's exciting. And here's one of our bedrooms, set up with its bunk bed and its queen bed. And it has its bench and hangers for hanging your clothes on. This is the smallest room we have. The rest of them are a little bigger. These are all pretty much the same. You can see we have the mirrors all up, the showers are all in, the rain heads are on. It looks great. You still have the rustic wood, came off the old walls. We put it right back on. Our exit lights are in. It's a new lodge. And for a lot of us, here's the puzzles, here's the games. We have to remember all the volunteers that were here. It's been just an exciting time.
When I think of Seacrest, I realize it's a gift from God. Go back into the 60s when those individuals helped us catch the vision for what can happen when we buy this retreat center. But actually, it's a tool of God, a gift that becomes a tool that He's entrusted to us as a church. Countless people will give their lives to Christ at this retreat center. Multitudes more will make significant decisions. Families will be connected. Disciples will be made. Relationships strengthened. This tool that God has given to us, that we have recently invested in, will invest back into us as a church. And we will see the gospel presented, neighbors strengthened and loved, disciples made, and out of that, a culture that moves more towards the heart of God. Seacrest is a gift from God, but it's a tool, and we get the opportunity to use that tool and to steward it for the glory of Christ. Yeah, that's awesome. There's just a score of people that need to be thanked, but I think in particular, Larry. I hope, Larry, you get a podcast called This Old Retreat Center. And I hope you make so much money that you buy Cabo. Let's move to the last one of my area, and that's the North Block. North Block was purchased a number of years ago. We came to the point where we realized as a church, we're not going to be able to exist here anymore. Why? Well, you have to have so many off-street parking spaces per your sanctuary size. We didn't have enough out here. We had a lease with this Bridges building over here, but that was most likely going to terminate, and when they sold it, it did. That meant that the city, pretty much at any given time, they could have come in. No, they can't grandfather you on those kinds of things. The reality is you have to have those. And so when God opened the door for us to buy that property over here, it literally enabled us to continue downtown. Otherwise, candidly, we would have had to probably sell and relocate somewhere else. And we feel that God has given us this place, this privilege to be downtown and to reach this city. So we bought this property for $3.4 million, as it tells you. Here's the really cool part. We only have 3 more payments, and we're done with that $3.4 million. If you want to pay $952,000 today, all you have to do is come up, give me a check, and then I will say next Sunday we are finished. What happens there? Well, number one, it secures our ability to stay here. We did add a number of businesses like First Lube. What was the desire of First Lube? To give people with vocational barriers, people coming out of prison, the mission and others, a fresh start. And we've helped just scores of people, and it's incredible. And not only now is it in the black, it's producing, and it's part of paying for the block, the paint store lease from us, and the office complex. And so there's been a lot of that has really kind of helped us. There's a revenue stream coming in that's in the positive, probably somewhere in the vicinity, round numbers of about 75,000 plus. That could continue for a long time. But we also realize there's some space over there that we need. YAM, Young Adults Ministry, this summer is running in the vicinity of about 90, and in the wintertime, it gets larger than that. It's kind of hit the limits of that space. And so we began to look at that. We brought in an architect, actually the one who built those original buildings, and said, what can we do to take this less than desirable space and move it to something that we like to use, and maybe even the city would like to use in the area of developing community space. So we hired a contractor or an architect. We started working with a contractor and began to look at it. And we came up with these plans. And we were kind of thinking it was going to be in the range of about $1 million. I know that sounds like a ton of money, and it is. But if you can get 10,000 square feet of really good usable space for that kind of money, that's good. Well, it wasn't 1 million. It was more like 2.2 million. When we brought in a couple of contractors local that we have a high level of trust, their skill and kind of insight, and we had them look at the blueprints and just tell us honestly, would you do this? Is this a wise move? And honestly, they said no. One of them said it this way, Mark, some of the hardest space you'll ever use is something that is long and narrow. When we begin to kind of step back and realize, well, we're going to put $2.2 million into space that's not going to be easy to use, it's long and narrow, it really won't expand any capacity for YAM to grow. And, by the way, it's a temporary fix of maybe 3 to 5 years. I think back to what they did, this church did, long before most of us, some of you were here, back in the 90s, when they bought the Community Life Center. What they did is they looked at that and said, what can we do here that will service this church for not just 3 or 5 years, but maybe 10, 15, 20, 25? You realize that we use that building every day. That gym has created the capacity to even launch upward. If we didn't have that gym, upward would be a dream in somebody's mind. When they built that, though, the thing that captures my mind is they built something that 25 years later now is still servicing us very well. And we came to the conclusion, as hard as it is, that for us to put $2 million into those 2 buildings over there wouldn't service us in 20 years. Probably wouldn't service us in 3. And so our conclusion at this point is, yes, we've raised money. We are going to take it and go to Spirit Mountain and invest it. Thought we'd turn it into 10 million because we're pretty good. And no, I've never gone to Spirit Mountain for that purpose. I've eaten there. We're gonna invest it. But more what we're going to do as a church with some outside help, bring some people in that can help us look as Center for Health and Healing expands, as Capital Christian needs to expand, and look at us and say, okay, God, what do we need not for the next 3 years, but what might we need for the next 20 years. Why do we say that? Turn over the page on page 16. The Good Neighbor Plan. If you keep track of city events and city development, you'll know that in the next 3 to 5 years, there's going to be a $500 million worth of development within about a 5-block radius of our church. Nordstrom's, JCPenney's, over on Riverfront, a 500-unit project is going in with a soccer stadium, 2 restaurants, and retail space. South of them, a senior center. All of that is in planning. Actually, they have projection dates on the building over there on Riverfront of 2026. And so when we look at that and say we really can't afford to spend $2 million for something that services us well for maybe 2 to 3 years. We have to step back and say, God, what do we need in our church, for our city? How do we service these 1,500, maybe 2,000 people that are going to be living within walking distance of our church? How do we service a church, school, a Capital Christian that is growing? And so as we step back, we're going to allow some experts to help us, if you will, wrestle with the maturation of our church, which will spell what options we take over there. It's not going to be quick. It's not going to be the next 2 months. It's not going to be 3 months. You'll be involved. If God lays some things on your heart, you're going to share that with us. We're going to bring in people that have design work. One in particular organization we've worked with before, they have 700 projects under their belt. Those are the kind of people we want to help look at us and say, what do we need to do? How do we need to think so that we're not spending a ton of money for a short run, but we spend maybe, yes, more money, but it's a long run. Just like, my friends, those dear brothers and sisters handed to us the Community Life Center. We want to hand the next generation. When I'm pushing up daisies, I have no idea if you can see down from heaven, but man, if I can, I do not want to look down at a church and say, wow, we gave them a 3-yard run instead of a 25-year run. That's what's happening in North Block. I wish I could tell you, man, everything's settled. We know where we're going. We got it locked. Yeah, I'd love to tell you that. I just can't. What I can tell you is that you've been faithful, and you're going to continue, I believe, to do that. And God will open that door and lay out where we need to walk in terms of North Block, and maybe, to be honest with you, even South Block. And to do that, Steve's going to come and talk to us about our finances and how good they are.
Well, it is easy to stand in front of you and talk about our finances, just like it's easy to talk about all the things that we're doing because you make it easy. It's your generosity that makes it easy. It's your generosity of your time. When I looked at there back on page 6, the number of volunteer hours that have been given to us, over 100,000. All those volunteers that work in all of our ministries, if we had to hire all of that, we'd have to double our budget. That's what your generosity means. The fact that you provide us with your talents, both as volunteers, but in other ways around the church, in terms of maintenance and other things improvements that we've done, but also your spiritual gifts as you share with others and you do ministry with others. Without that, we'd lose effectiveness. And your treasure, certainly that's important because you're so generous with your treasures, with your money. We're able to meet our obligations. We're able to meet our debts. We're able to pay our bills on a monthly basis, and we're able to dream for the future. And that's what we want to be about. I hope as you go back and read this book, and those first pages where it had all those statistics about what's going on, that you're able to say and point at one or two places on the page and say, I was part of that. Because that's what makes us as a community and helps move us forward and helps us to dream those dreams. But to the practical, how do we build a general fund budget? Well, we look at a number of things. We look at the economics around us. We see that in the news all the time. We try and make determinations. We don't have a crystal ball, but we talk to people, we read, we just try and see what's going on around us and kind of forecast into the future a little bit. We look at commitments we've made. That's our mortgage payment. It's the staff that we've agreed to hire. It's the bills that we have to pay, keep the lights on, keep the heat, keep the cooling. And then we look at what our capacity might be. And so we look at all those things as we begin to build the budget. We have conversations with our volunteer leaders, the people on the Stewardship Fiscal Committee, the people on our deacons board. They all get involved in those conversations as we begin to lay the groundwork. Staff gets involved in building budgets for their own areas. And we have some general targets that we try and meet. We try and keep staff expenses between 60 and 63% of the budget. We look to keep and maintain missionary support at least at 15% of the budget. And so as we moved into budgeting for the 23-24 year, we decided a couple of decisions. One was that we would ask for a 6% interest or increase in the budget. Last year we asked for more than that. We didn't believe that we could do that this year again. And so we built a budget around that increase. Those increases include wage increases. When we talk about wages and benefit costs, those increases were 5.5%. We project those increases to be about 5.5% this year. Ministry areas were increased by about 5% in each of those ministry areas. So we put the budget together, then we go back to the Stewardship Committee and the Board of Deacons and say, here it is, here's what we propose. We talk about it, we work through it, make sure our priorities are right, and then we have to get their approval, of which the Board of Deacons has approved, and then you will be voting on the budget 2 weeks from now to approve this. As you look at those numbers, this is the first time the vast majority of you have seen those. We don't have time to have conversation about those right here in this large setting, but if you've got questions, please feel free to contact me at the church office. I'll be down here for a while after this service to answer any questions you have. It may take some of you time to kind of mull things over and kind of look at that and get an understanding or generate those questions. Give me a call. We can meet at the office. We can talk on the phone. We want to be as open as possible as we can with regards to this budget. So I look forward to meeting with any of you that want to, and I ask Mark to come and close us, please.
Steve had made a statement that if you look in this booklet, you'll see a ton of numbers and some few pictures. But I think all of you who have been with us for a while and you've participated in this church in a variety of ways, you can look through this budget and say, I'm here. I'm a part of that. And that's really what is a church. It's not that you attend here, it's that you are a part of this. Last night I was talking with a young lady who's struggling, candidly, almost beyond what I would call suicidal ideation, really struggling. I opened this and I said, are you in here? She said, no. I said, one of the goals I want to give you for next year, because you need a purpose for living, is that next year when we present this, I want you to be able to look through it and say, there I am. I belong. I belong to this place and they belong to me. I make a difference and they make a difference in my life. And I want to invite, for those of you who are in here, you've faithfully given and served. I just want to say thank you. That's what makes the church the most beautiful place in the world to me. But for those of you who maybe you're new, first day, you've been here 3 weeks, maybe 6 months, but you would say, I don't show up here. I want to ask you, join us. Join us. There's a lot of great churches in this city, a lot of great ones. But if you didn't pay me, I'd attend this one. I love this place and I love you. And for those of you who, you know what, I'm not a partner. I attend. I want to ask you today, move. Not to another place. Move to another place in your mind. I want in. I want to serve. I want to love this city. I want next year to pray that we see 200 people come to Christ. And so would you join us as we stand and sing this last song? Would you, in this moment, as we sing to the glory of Christ, would you commit for those who haven't? I'm in. I want this place to be a place I belong and I partner. Let's stand together.